Now that the April Fool's continuity is taken care of, let's have some fun with me doing this for realsies. Closing thoughts. Trixie, eyes on you. Trixie's eyes drifted open the following morning to come face to face with a silken wall of midnight blue and purple-pink highlights that was the back of Twilight Sparkle's mane. Oh. Oh! They did it! Their forelegs were wrapped around the lavender unicorn in sleeping form, as you could feel the slow, gentle rhythm of Twilight's breathing, second to the comfortable warmth of her body. Needless to say, Trixie awoke with a smile. Still very much dreamy as she was, she gently drew a hoof along Twilight's side and lifted to stroke her mane. Twilight removed the bun before turning in, so her hair was back to its normal, usual straightness. Trixie could run her touch along its length without a care in the world. Still be enjoying its softness, and still hoping that Twilight felt the same warmth she was feeling right now. Twilight let out a grunt, a quiet, content sort of grunt. It was almost a shame to have woken her, but the sight of her sleepy face as she rolled over was still more than worth it. She lifted her eyes open halfway and met Trixie with a smile of her own. "Good morning," Twilight whispered. Since she wasn't sure whether she was quite awake enough to speak yet, be safe, she opted for the next best thing. She closed the tiny gap between them and planted a soft, sweet kiss on Twilight's lips. It was the easiest, most tiny, gentlest gesture she could think of, yet felt more powerful than a dozen longer touches. She felt a tender smile on Twilight's lips before she pulled back and opened her eyes. "Good morning, Twilight," she whispered back. They stared at each other for one long moment, before Twilight moved in and nuzzled up against Trixie's chest, closing her eyes and exhaling in comfort. Trixie rested her head atop her partner's and closed her eyes too. There was no need to get up just yet. They cuddled for much of the morning, though it really came to an end when Twilight needed to get up to use the bathroom. And that wasn't long before Trixie was up on her hose as well, tying her mane and checking herself over in the mirror. The smile narrowed and left her face for a second. Never before had she awoken feeling so content as this. It was already 10 o'clock by the time he went down for breakfast in the dining hall, just off the lobby. They had in there before, though never so late in the morning, and it seemed a lot busier now, by comparison. The dozens of different sized tables dotted around the hall were so full it might have been a challenge to find an empty one if it were not for the waiter that met them at the door. He showed them to a table in the far corner of the room and brought their breakfast salads over a few minutes later, leaving them to eat. Trixie wasn't particularly hungry, so she took a little more than an idle mouthful before looking at her partner. Twilight glanced up from her bowl and smiled, still chewing her way through her mouthful. They sat in silence for a moment, until Twilight swallowed and spoke up. "Hey, I wanted to say thank you," she said, "for sharing the bed with me last night. It meant a lot." Trixie rolled her eyes slightly. "Shouldn't I be the one thanking you? It is your bed, after all." Twilight frowned as she looked at the table, as though she was genuinely thinking about it. Then, after a moment, she smirked and read Trixie's eyes again. "Yeah, maybe you should be." Trixie had been going to leave it at that, as she saw the nervy, expectant look on Twilight's face. Trixie scoffed and found a smirk of her own. "Thank you for letting me share your bed, Twilight Sparkle." With a satisfied giggle, Twilight took another forkful of her salad and turned to the side, looking out across the hall. Trixie followed her gaze. A few tables along, Nightshade and Violet were eating their own breakfast, and a few tables along for them, Earth Twister and Sandstorm. "Looks like everybody's eating late today," said Twilight idly. "Or taking longer to eat," Trixie observed, watching the normally upbeat Earth Twister eat his silent way through his mouth. "They're all on edge, probably anxious about their results." Twilight grunted. "That makes sense, I guess." Trixie frowned as he looked across at Twilight, who was wearing an unreadable expression. "Are you looking?" Trixie asked. There was a short pause before Twilight flashed her a bright smile. "Of course, never been better." Trixie couldn't help but smile at the simple statement. It was typical that every pony had heard all the time, "I've never been better," but somehow she knew Twilight really meant it. She never had been better, and that was exactly how Trixie felt, waking up beside her that morning. "I suppose you still had that good feeling then," said Trixie, idly digging at her salad with a fork. Twilight nodded brightly. "That's right," she chirped. Still smiling, keeping her eyes on Twilight all the while, Trixie raised the "Good," she said. Fireworks exploded in the air overhead as the 10 competitors made their way into the arena under the midday sun. 2 rows of trumpet bearers flanked them as they marched through the open portcullis, and horn blasts filled the air along with the approving roar of the audience, many of whom stood and waved down to ponies entering the field. Tracy walked near the front of the group, Kate following up behind her with an immodest smirk on her lips. She wouldn't do so much as to bring herself to feel anxious. It all came down to this. But like Twilight, she had a good feeling, especially having out her one-up flair with that dance last night. "I've beaten him this time," she told herself, smirking wider. "With Twilight backing me up, he never stood a chance." Twilight herself strode alongside, wearing a proud smile instead of a smirk, while otherwise looking just as confident as Tracy felt. Their eyes met. They exchanged a quick, knowing glance before turning to face ahead again. In the center of the arena, Princess Celestia stood tall and graceful, from whom Trixie received a flattering smile. The princess overshadowed a unicorn stallion, light brown cloak and a short dark mane, who had one four-hoof perched on top of a tiny wooden chest. The stallion wore a particularly teasy grin, and the 5 pairs of competitors approached. He levitated a microphone from his back and raised it to his mouth. "Welcome! Welcome, all of you!" he said. His voice echoed out throughout the stadium. There was no mistaking that accent. This was the announcer that had been commentating their performances throughout the display. Trixie and Twilight stopped at a respectable distance away from him, and the princess, and the other competitors along the other side. "Well, it's been quite a display this year, folks," the announcer continued. "We've had the excitement of Chimera wrangling, drama of the Pillar Climb, and of course those spectacular magical performances, crafted by our competitors themselves. But alas, we've finally come to an end." He hung his head in mock sorrow for a moment, before raising it up and grinning widely again. "But one thing remains," he said. "The placings for each pair have been decided, and we have the exciting mirror crowning our victors yet to come. And while I'm sure that I could ramble for hours about all the highlights and dramatic moments we've had thus far, I think you must rather hear the results. Am I right?" This was met with an approving clap from the audience, as well as shuffling for the competitor's line. As he prepared for the news, Trixie cast a smirk sideways at Flair, who stood at the opposite end line. He caught it and smirked back, apparently unaware of his imminent humiliation. Then stood Trixie, gesturing. "All right then," chuckled the announcer as he stepped off the chest. I quickly opened it up and proffered it to the princess. "Princess Celestia, if you would!" "Thank you, broadcast," said Celestia warmly. Her horn lit up a brilliant yellow, as she magically reached into the chest to receive a pair of copper medallions, along with a slip of paper. She lifted her head to address the podium as a whole. "In 5th place," Trixie cringed at the sudden volume of the princess's voice. She hadn't used the microphone, but her words still echoed out throughout the entire place. "Most notable for their unique and wonderful performance in the 3rd event, I am pleased to announce that Nightshade and Violet are winners of the copper medallion." A sort of polite clap spread throughout the stadium, though the parent in question didn't seem too satisfied with it. Nightshade hung his head and frowned deeply, whilst Violet gave him a long, apologetic stare. The princess smiled patiently at them, whilst the announcer, broadcast, beckoned them forwards. Violet nuzzled her partner's neck. He looked at her, cracked a tiny smile, and together they shuffled forwards to receive their medals. They both bowed their heads before the princess and allowed her to slip the prizes around their necks. "Do not despair, you two," said Celestia quietly. "Your performance here displayed an impressive level of both talent and determination. These things will take you far, so as long as you do not give up." The 2 ebon-coated ponies stood in awe at the princess's kind words, and each offered a quiet mumbling of thanks before moving to one side. Started a line next to broadcast. Tracy cast a long, pensive look at Celestia. "They lost," she mused. "I can't imagine. But the princess is right. Giving up is pointless. I wouldn't give up if I lost. If I lost." A frown crossed her face, but she promptly shook it off as the audience gave another polite clap for Nightshade and Violet, waiting only for them to take their places. Broadcast offered his test to Celestia again. From it, she withdrew another slip of paper and 2 more medallions, this time bronze. "In 4th place, we have what is no doubt our most diverse couple this year," said Princess. "Let us applaud for Baydasher and Cherry Blossom." Applaud they did, and considerably loudly, probably thanks to the princess being the one that asked. True to form, Cherry Blossom was as cheery as ever. Baydasher held his stern expression as he approached the princess. The first was not the word Trixie would have used to describe them. "Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience," said. Overpowering the announcer's magic, Zizi holding the microphone. We hope you all enjoyed our performances this year, and we'd like to remind you all of the Manhattan Flower Festival coming up next month. Make sure to get your tickets early to avoid disappointments, and volunteers are always welcome. With a secondly sweet smile, she passed the mic over to her partner, who drew himself up and eyed it warily. He leaned in. B-Dasher now returns to his bakery, he said in an appropriate gruff voice, where he will bake buns and tasty sweets. I pity the fool that does not come and get a free sample next Wednesday. Oof! The announcement was met with momentary stunned silence, followed by a much louder applause. Princess Celestia actually let out a warm chuckle at that, as the pair returned to the microphone and bowed their heads before her. She spoke to them as she presented their medals, but Trixie couldn't make out the words over the clapping. Baydasher and Cherry Blossom took their place, beside Nightshade and Violet, whilst the next pair of medallions, made of shining silver, were lifted from the chest. For the Dominion and Pillar Climb event, as well as their overall performance during the others, I hereby announce Earth Twister and Sandstorm as winners of 3rd place. Trixie couldn't help but cast a glance at them as the applause started up. Twister grunted in awe, kicked the ground lightly. He didn't seem too put out, though, because he and his brother exchanged a smile straight afterwards, and started forwards. Those before them, Twister and Sandstorm bowed before the princess and accepted their medals. Congratulations to both of you. You showed a unique discipline in your use of magic here, something that is quite rare among unicorns your age. You might bear in mind that the Canterlot Guard are always looking for gifted magic users, if such a thing strikes your fancy. Having received their and spoken with their thanks, the two joined the line with the others. As they did so, the stadium already fell in expectant silence. This reader would also like to remind you that even though the Royal Guards have faltered against the big bads, just because we don't see how they handle against normal foes is no reason to insult them. And those who try, will receive a prompt thunderbolt to the face. May I remind you, I am a druid. I can do that. After received their words spoken thanks, the two joined others. As they did so, the stadium steadily fell into expectant silence. Now only 2 pairs, 2 places remained. 2 triumphant winners, 2 humiliated losers. No, Trixie corrected herself. This is personal. There's only going to be 1 humiliated loser, and that's either Flair or me. Her smirk had long since faded from her face now. She felt herself beginning to waver. The silence in the stadium was absolute. It served to remind her there was nothing she could do now to influence the result. She did her best. Her best was amazing, but from a third party's point of view, was her best better than his best? Can you feel the tension in the air, Philly Colts? Said the announcer, speaking to his microphone. I know I can. Only 4 competitors remain. All winners in my book. Only 2 will walk away with the platinum medallions and the title of champions of the Manhattan display. The announcer grinned between the 4 of them for a moment, while striding forward towards Flair rose. Tracy's heart jumped to her throat. Do you have anything you'd like to say to your rivals before the announcement? He asked, offering the microphone. Some fighting words, perhaps? Tracy let out a sadly relieved laugh. Flair exchanged a glance with his partner. A quiet chuckle. No fighting words, he said, but I would like to say that it's been an exciting experience to compete against such a talented unicorns as you. Twilight and Trixie. Flashed him a smile. Thank you for the exhilarating competition. This drew a round of applause from the audience, and a forcibly suppressed smile from Twilight. Trixie bit her tongue. Well, what a nice sentiment, said the announcer, trying over to stand beside Twilight and Trixie. And have you anything to say in return, Phillies? He said to the microphone to Twilight, who softened a little bit a little as he did. Clearly off guard, Twilight made the back step, only stopped halfway and make herself look even more awkward. She glanced at the princess. Her stammering echoed throughout the stadium. Hearing this made her cringe a little. Her face was flushed. Her mouth moved slightly and soundlessly. It might be an adorable sight, if not for the embarrassing fact that they were being watched by hundreds of speech-hungry spectators. Instinct, Trixie lifted her nose and stepped forward to seize control of the mic and made an improvised speech of her own. She cleared her throat, took a breath, and stopped. Twilight, Celestia, and Broadcast were all looking at her expectantly, just as much as the audience were. Trixie stayed silent, not because she didn't know what to say. She could ad-lib a speech with the best of them. As Mercy felt a strange kind of obligation to let Twilight say her piece. So after a moment's hesitation, she shut her mouth and took a step closer to Twilight, smiling into her partner's eyes. Tracy reached out across the hoof with her, offering support, a silent gesture and more. Twilight stared at her for a long time. Mouth parted open as the color of her feet returned to normal. As he blinked, returned to smile, and as he turned to face the microphone, I'm sorry, I lost myself for a moment there, as he said, drawing a smile, and an understanding nod from the princess. Thank you, Flare, and Rose, and everybody else too. It's been a real honor to compete alongside you all, and to perform for such a wonderful audience. The crowd offered an appreciative round of cheers. During the pause, Twilight cast a long, thoughtful glance at Trixie, smiled her approval. And of course, I hope we win, Twilight continued, though a little more quietly, a little self-conscious glance at Celestia. I'm also very grateful for being invited to compete in the first place. If not for this event, there are a lot of things I might not have seen or done, or felt. She gave Trixie a warm smile. Whatever happens next, I know I'm a better pony for it, and I'll be in good news with the new bonds I made. Thank you. As the thunderous applause rang out across the stadium, Trixie could only stare at Twilight, just swallowing something that felt so much warmer than embarrassment at the awkwardly romantic statement. Standing so close, she was hard-pressed to simply not lean in the rest of the way, steal a kiss from Twilight then and there. The poor mare would have died of embarrassment in front of her princess, though. Thankfully, Trixie managed to maintain some of her discretion. It could always wait until... Oh, yeah. Well, I'm certain romantics and all of us can appreciate that nicely developed sentiment, said Broadcast, stepping back to smile at them both. Thank you, Flare and Rose, Twilight and Trixie. Now that the speeches are out of the way, I can without further ado go on to announce a certain turn of events regarding our placings. Lost in Twilight as she was, it took Trixie a moment to register the words. Once she did, she blinked rapidly. She turned to face the announcer, who was standing by his chest again, but hadn't lifted it. What turn of events? She muttered. Curiosity was masked by a cautious muttering from the audience, as well as some exchanged glances between the other competitors. Princess! Said Broadcast, bowing his head to her. Celestia bowed her own head grandly, before unfurling her wings. She kicked off on the ground, sending a blast of warm air over the ponies closest to her, began to fly out towards her box in the stands. Where's she going? Trixie hissed in Twilight's ear. How should I know? Said Twilight. Throughout the first and second events, said Broadcast, speaking into his mic again, Trixie and Twilight Sparkle remained slightly ahead of Flare and Rose, in terms of points, that is. But the third event saw a spectacular performance from each pair, for which the final round of points was then awarded, as you know, by our judges. Trixie's body stiffened. He said, but. And the points were awarded as such. Flare and Rose received an average of 9.5 points out of a possible 10, while Trixie and Twilight received an average of 8.5. What? Trixie growled, surging forwards, only to be held back by Twilight's touch. As he pulled a slip from the paper in a wooden chest, smiled at it. These points were then added to the totals, leaving us with turntables and a new score. Our two pairs are tied for first place. What? Said Trixie and Twilight both. They were far from the only ones amused by his statement. Throughout the stands, a rowdy sort of muttering began to break out, punctuated by yells along the lines of, a tie! And, that's rubbish! The umpire's blind! The umpire's blind! Oh, I am not! Oh, for Pete's sake, I can't believe this! Kill the umpire! Kill the umpire! Announcer chuckled into a little microphone. I'm sure you're all hungry to see a winner. You really don't think we leave it at that, do you? The crowd quieted down, apparently willing to listen for now. For their part, Twilight and Trixie exchanged questioning glances. But how do we resolve a tie between the two pairs of identical scores? I hear you ask, Broadcast yelled. Well, the answer is simple. Trixie cast a look at Flare, and also had a brow quirked to question. Rose was concerned, Twilight anxious. They all turned to face the announcer together, as he threw up his hose and yelled at the top of his lungs. A magic duel! Oh, come on. You don't know that this fic was going to end with something cool as that. Especially you, George. Okay, that's probably not your name, but it's what to freak out all the Georges out there.